We'd like to make an opportunity here to thank our partner SEI Design for sponsoring today's opening keynote. SEI Design is an educational design specialist and award-winning design firm with extensive K-12 experience. They are at booth number 49. Please stop and say hello to them. I'd like to introduce this video. Thank you to SEI Design Group. And now we will go on to the keynote. I've got a whole bunch of stuff here, but Dana doesn't like me reading a whole bunch of stuff. But I think some of it's worthwhile, and then some of it from here a little bit. Dana is the co-founder and chief executive officer of World Savvy, a national education nonprofit working to educate and engage youth as responsible global citizens. World Savvy supports change agents in K-12 education to create more inclusive, adaptive schools that ensure all young people can develop the skills and dispositions needed to thrive in a more diverse, interconnected world. World Savvy and Dana have been featured on PBS and the New York Times, Edutopia, and all kinds of places. We met Dana about, 6 or 7 months ago at an event that we were doing, and we walked away from that going, oh my. I believe also some of our executive committee members saw her somewhere else and walked away saying, oh my. I got to know Dana a little bit more, and people who know me well know I say all the time, I like people around me that are nice and are smart. Dana fits the bill on both points. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today's keynote speaker, Dana Mortensen. Dana.
Thank you all for welcoming me here today. It really is an honor and a privilege to be with you. The theme for Together We Rise, Shaping Education for Today, Tomorrow, and Beyond, is pretty much what I spend almost all of my time thinking about, along with my colleagues at World Savvy. And so today I want to think about that together and maybe provoke some thinking around how the world is changing and what the implication of that is for how we think about teaching and learning and culture in our schools. I want to start to ground us in a story that will hopefully give you some context about why I'm standing here and how World Savvy has been shaped over the last 2 decades. This is a picture of myself and my co-founder, Madiha Murshid. Madiha is a Bangladeshi Muslim who grew up throughout the Mideast, went to high school in Singapore, and came to the US to attend college. I met her in the fall of 2000 when we were both attending graduate school at Columbia University. Both of us are the children of educators and really believed that education is the bedrock and foundation that helps us all develop the worldview we need to navigate this complex, interdependent, and diverse world. Well, in the second year of grad school, in the fall of 2001, a week into classes, 9/11 happened. And although communities around us were lifting one another up in support, there was also a dark xenophobic backlash that was impacting people like my friend Madiha. She was verbally and physically assaulted in New York City. And rather than becoming angry, she, along with me, turned that into contemplation around how the world was changing and what would that mean about how schools would have to change as well and evolve. So there's 3 things we thought about then and that we still think about every day at World Savvy that are the pillars of how we think about what K-12 needs to be for our students. And the first is who we are. In the most recent census in 2020, 1 in 7 people marked some other race on the US Census, and an increasing number of people selected 2 or more races. This isn't just an isolated stat, it's something that is now impacting our most intimate relationships. Nearly 3 in 10 Asian, 1 in 4 Latino, and 1 in 5 Black newlyweds are married to a member of a different ethnic or racial group. And more than 3/4 of these unions are with a white partner. So this is not abstract. These are our most personal, intimate family relationships in our multi-ethnic democracy. I'll give you an example of this fluidity in identity that's really become more characteristic for young people all over. So if we have tennis fans in the audience anywhere, Emma Raducanu is a British tennis champion. But her father is Romanian and she speaks fluent Romanian. So Romanians really sort of claim Emma and her victories as their own. They feel a sense of national pride. But her mother is Chinese and Emma speaks fluent Mandarin. So the Chinese people feel that Emma's victories belong to them as well. But she was born in Canada, so Canadians feel a similar sense of attachment to Emma and her amazing capabilities. But she moved to the UK quite young and has competed under that banner, and it's where she was trained. So Britons like to claim Emma for their own. This kind of fluid ethnic, racial, linguistic identity is much more characteristic of an up-and-coming generation of young people here in the United States and everywhere. In the most recent census, the white population declined for the first time since 1790. Latino and Hispanic Americans represent about half of the last decade's population gain. And more than 40% of Americans now identify themselves as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And if you think about young people, the population under 18, the people in the classrooms in your districts across the country, over half identify as BIPOC individuals. So as we're looking at these stats and considering what relevant learning is for young people, that reflects their identity, that leverages that diversity, that helps them learn and feel seen and heard in the classroom. Here in New York State, you are already a collective majority. The white population is 41%, and you can see a growing amount of diversity among other populations in New York State. And this isn't just in big cities. So we had a white population decline here in New York, as well as a slight decline in the Black population, but every other racial and ethnic group experienced population increases across every single domain, cities, towns, and villages, which I know are represented by this group in this room. If you look at this chart, you'll see that even at the village level, people who identify as some other race increased 194% in a 10-year period. So again, wherever you are, wherever you live, wherever you're teaching, wherever your communities are, this demographic diversity reflects who America is becoming, a multi-ethnic democracy. The US Census projects that we will become a collective majority by 2045 or perhaps sooner. And again, youth are the engine driving this growth. And it's not just in places like New York and Texas and California. This is happening across the country. So I currently live in Minnesota. It's not a geography quiz, but it's sort of the middle top, mostly yellow. Very cold, we have that in common. And Minnesota is mostly yellow, and for those of you who don't have X-ray vision, this is quite small. Yellow represents the the lowest historical diversity in these places, and the largest increase. Those are the yellow areas. Iowa, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Minnesota. So in these places, in the matter of 10 years, you could go from predominantly white districts to enrollment of 25% plus of Somali students in Faribault, Minnesota elementary schools. We have the largest population of Somali students in the diaspora in the US. So again, what is the implication across the country about what relevant learning looks like for the students in our classrooms? 66 million, or 21% of US residents, age 5 plus, speak a language other than English at home now. And 25% of those students are in public school. So again, this is our country changing, struggling in many ways, as we've seen in these polarized times, to understand how this collective majority will come together in this multi-ethnic democracy. And the implication for classrooms is enormous. The second thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how we work. So to the degree that K-12 education is designed to prepare people for workforce readiness, what does that mean? The reality is that the world is changing faster right now than in any time in human history. If you had told my 8th grade self trying to stretch the phone cord 25 feet into my bedroom to avoid my siblings and brothers trying to use it at the same time that I could hold in my hand a phone that could not only order food, but also talk to anyone I want and send emails, it would have blown my mind. But it's true. There were 5.4 billion Google searches per day in 2021. This data has probably increased even since this stat. Again, for those of you who had to use the Dewey Decimal System to write your research papers, which I'm assuming is most of the people in the room, this would have been a mind-blowing stat to consider as a young person, right? None of these things. So the profound nature of how the exponentially greater amount of information that we are both consumers of and producers of have implications for what young people are required to distill and think about and make sense of and problem solve with. So earlier, Martha gave a shout out to Buckminster Fuller, and those of you familiar with his work may be familiar with the knowledge doubling curve. Buckminster Fuller said that in 1900, human knowledge doubled every 100 years. And that by 1945, it was doubling roughly every 25 years. That by 2014, that was doubling almost every 13 months. And that by 2020, it was doubling every 12 hours. So I want you to consider, again, the implication for what that means about learning, right? Content knowledge and technical skills in a world where the half-life of information is shrinking by the second. So this makes workforce readiness quite a moving target in the 21st century as we think about what young people need to be prepared. At the World Economic Forum a few years ago, they shared with us that a whopping 85% of today's grade schoolers will hold a job that does not yet exist. My 3rd and 5th graders are more likely to have a profession I've never heard of than ever before. Some of those disruptors we're already aware of, things like driverless cars and flying drones and 3D printers and contour crafting, big data, AI, mass energy storage, robots. And some of these jobs we're also already familiar with. Vertical farms, atmospheric water harvesting, that was a new one to me. Drone traffic optimization, crowdfunding specialists, AI creators, and cryptocurrency bankers. I don't know about anyone in this room, but I would never have imagined any of these even 20 years ago. So what that means is that we're preparing young people to live in a more diverse world, a more dramatically diverse world, to do jobs that don't exist yet, to solve problems we don't even know are problems with technologies that haven't been invented yet. An extremely tall order. But schools are where this learning begins. And what it means is that the competencies that young people need to be prepared for that are completely different. And that rote memorization and a standardized approach to learning will never get young people ready for that.
My belief is in the next 10 to 15 years, there's likely to be a net loss of jobs. That is because the speed at which routine jobs are being displaced will be faster than the speed at which new jobs will be created. Tasks that are repetitive in nature, that don't require deep thoughts, strategic, creative thinking, those are the jobs that are most in danger. And on the other hand, if we look at the longer term, maybe 20 to 30 years, that doesn't account for the many jobs that will be invented and created. But it's unfortunate that we can't quite predict what those jobs are. Just like if we went back to 1995 and asked me what jobs would be created by the internet, there's no way I would have listed Uber driver.
So how do workers future-proof themselves for jobs that don't yet exist?
We don't know what the specific new jobs are going to be, but I think we do know the kinds of skills that people are going to need. And some of those are soft skills in terms of knowing how to work with other people, in terms of knowing how to learn to do new things. And some of them are harder skills, whether that's in a particular industry, with a particular technology.
What's going to happen when we have even more technology? And when the new technology displaces even more people? There are these narratives out there. If I get a little bit more education, I'm going to do better. And that's been the mantra for people all the way along. If you just get a little bit more education, there's a lot of people that have master's degrees that are now working in fulfillment centers and working in part-time jobs.
Future-proofing is really what education was always supposed to be, right? It was supposed to provide you with the ability to be flexible, in essence, being employable.
The number one reason consistently for enrolling in post-secondary education is to get a good job. But when you actually talk to college graduates, they are consistently telling us that they don't actually feel prepared for the labor market.
So there's this gap between what young people are coming out of the system with and what they need to actually thrive in the workforce. There's a Future of Jobs report that comes out every October annually, and the last report told us that the top workforce skills for 2025 were critical thinking, analysis, complex problem solving, and active learning. Again, things that cannot be gained or developed or honed by rote memorization and memorization of content. We're entering into an era where young people need the kind of competencies that allow them to navigate ambiguity with comfort and change with comfort, something that K-12 systems were not necessarily designed to do. An emphasis on teamwork and collaboration and creativity to address these problems we don't even know yet are problems. In a recent survey, 92% of 900 executives surveyed said that soft skills, we'll get back to this air quote in a moment, were equally or more important than technical skills. And a full 89% said they had a difficult time finding employees with those skills. So this gap is real and it's growing. Every day that we don't reimagine what's happening inside K-12 learning systems. And I broke a really important rule for myself with the last two slides. And so if you leave this discussion remembering only one thing, please remember to stop saying soft skills. Because unless it's a kitten or like a fuzzy blanket, soft does not evoke the sense of urgency or important or weight of these competencies and skills, and they are essential for young people to thrive. And so now, every time I hear it, I like to shout out something different. So you can all imagine, we're calling them essential skills, skills to thrive. Imagine what that looks like for you. Language matters. The other thing that we think a lot about is not just how do we prepare young people for these jobs we don't know are coming, but how do we create an environment where they can think about how to create jobs through an ethical lens and a moral lens that are good for people and the planet and that help lift everybody up. How do we help them shape those jobs? One of the things that controls almost every one of our lives is artificial intelligence. So AI algorithms tell you everything from like, you should be friends with this person on Facebook to you need more toilet paper from Target, really sort of pedestrian things that are non-threatening. But AI algorithms are generated by people and by data. And so they represent and amplify the bias of people creating these algorithms. And I want to give you a couple of examples of how dangerous that can be. Amazon created a hiring tool in 2020. Within 24 hours, it started discriminating against women, and they had to take it down, right? So again, it's pulling data that exists in the world. Human beings who have embedded bias are creating these algorithms, and they are flawed in many ways. Some more challenging and really frightening examples of this are when they're used for things like the criminal justice system, whether you get a house, whether you get a mortgage, whether you get stopped by police. There's an algorithm called Compass that in 2016, ProPublica found Compass is used to essentially guide sentencing and to try and predict recidivism rates. How likely are people to recommit crimes? This is currently used in 46 states across the country. They found in 2016 that Compass was twice as likely to report that a black defendant would recommit a crime than a white defendant. Again, I stress this is used in 46 states across the country. Another example is facial recognition software. I'm not sure anyone or everyone in this audience is aware, but as of 2016, about half of Americans, split this room in half, and upstairs, I see you, split that room in half, is in a system with your facial recognition data. It's being used, it's out there in the world for lots of different purposes and reasons. Facial recognition data has gotten better in terms of accuracy. It's over 90%. But when you look at the top 3 companies providing facial recognition data, and you actually parse that data out, and you look at what it does with black women or dark-skinned women versus a white man, the accuracy drops 34%. Again, the implications of developing this kind of technology and shaping the workforce of the future is something we have to prepare young people to grapple with. Complex, really important issues about how our world is shaped. And these algorithms, because they're not transparent, reinforce and become less clear over time. So again, what competencies would young people in your classrooms need to be thinking about, not just to get the job at Google or at Facebook, but to be prepared to shape and challenge where they see things that aren't good for people and the planet and equitable circumstances for all. This is also happening in an environment where we are awash not just with information, but for the ability to interact with folks. So if you were a member of Facebook around 2008, you were one of 100 people. There's currently 2.85 billion active Facebook users. And in a lot of ways, Facebook might be where you get to see your family's, pictures and your friends' kids. If you haven't seen them in a while, maybe reconnect with an ex. I don't know what it is you do on Facebook. But it's also contributed to this rise of misinformation. And I think we all know where this landed in January of 2020, but a study from August 2019 to January 2020 found that misinformation on Facebook got 6 times more clicks than factual news stories. 6 times more clicks. And because clicks are good, they're good for advertising, eyeballs matter, it wasn't addressed, hence the Facebook whistleblower scandal that some of you may have read about. But in the meantime, does anyone remember what happened between August 2019 and January 2020? Right? This is the world that our young people are growing up in. They have to shape this kind of technology, and they also have to develop the critical thinking skills to be able to navigate that to make good decisions. I believe fully the future of our democracy actually depends on that. The third thing we think about all the time at World Savvy, and that we help schools and districts navigate and try and think about, is not just who we are and not just what the future workforce will look like, but also what kinds of challenges are graduates going to encounter when they leave the walls of the school. And the thing that I can say unequivocally about the kinds of problems, we've all just lived through a global pandemic. I'm not sure if we can say through yet. Can we say that? Are we allowed? Are we through? Almost through a global pandemic together? Is that most of these challenges have global cause and global consequence, right? They can't be isolated to one individual or one country that caused it, and no one country or one individual is going to solve it. So I'm going to give you an example that's close to my heart, because as I mentioned, my co-founder is from Bangladesh. Has anyone been to Bangladesh ever in this audience? There's usually like 1 or 2 people. Okay, not today. Bangladesh is a small country in Southeast Asia, and roughly landmass-wise is about the size of the state of Iowa. But Bangladesh has half the population of the entire United States of America within its borders. By 2050, they're estimating that 1/3 of Bangladesh, as a result of rising sea levels caused by climate change, will be underwater. I have seen this firsthand on my trips there. So I want you for a moment to imagine taking the entire half of the population of the US, moving them to Iowa, flooding 1/3 of it with nowhere for those people to go, right? Bangladesh didn't cause climate change, even if they contributed, and they certainly aren't going to solve it on their own. So these kinds of challenges are going to require unprecedented levels of collaboration and cooperation and critical thinking across borders of all kinds. And if Bangladesh feels too far away for you, I want you to consider the most recent UN climate report that's here in the US, that by 2060, some 162 million people, nearly 1 in 2 in the United States, will experience a decline in the quality of their environment, more heat and less water. I promise this depressing dip in this presentation will rebound. Stay tuned. 28 million people across the country by 2070 will experience Manhattan-sized megafires. And my colleagues who are here from Northern California, this is an annual event now. And a full 13 million people will be forced to move away from submerged coastlines, the largest migration in our history. So if anyone's been to Louisiana in the last couple of decades, slowly over time, the erosion of the land, they've actually changed the interstate signs, the shape of the state, as a result of this erosion. So I want you to think about, we think about it every day, how the world is evolving. The population of young people who are in our classrooms and are in our communities and in our workplace, the rapidly changing workforce and the demands of what it means to be prepared for that, and the kinds of challenges and problems that young people coming out of your school systems need to be prepared to confront. And I want to share with you a snapshot of what's happened in the US in the last year. At a time when we need to be broadening perspectives and preparing young people with real critical thinking skills, this is where we were in 2021. 1,579 book bans threatened. In the first 9 months of 2022, there were 1,600. That is more than in any year in the 20 years prior, since that's been recorded. 36 states have adopted or introduced laws that restrict teaching about race or racism. And state lawmakers across the country have introduced a record 238 bills so far that would limit LGBTQ rights in the classroom and outside. I want you for a moment to sit with the disconnect. I want you to think about Ananya, the amazing student from VVS, who shared with us earlier in that video what she wants, how she wants to feel in a classroom, what she needs to feel seen and heard and supported as she learns. So at World Savvy, we ingest all this information, depressing as it may be at times, and there's also lots of hopeful things happening, and ask ourselves the question every day, so what does the future of learning look like? How do you actually prepare students? If it's not standardization and it's not rote memorization, and you can't just have siloed subjects and expect that they'll be spit out, get a great grade on a test, and be ready, what does that mean? And for us, we define that as being globally competent. And so we lean on this matrix, this global competence matrix, and define it as the capacity and disposition to understand and act on issues of global significance. And there's an important asterisk there which says it's including those close to home. I think when we say global competence or we think about building these kinds of competencies, we think it's, so we know the capitals of countries. Don't care, not interested. It'd be nice. That geographic knowledge is indicative of something else. But these are challenges that are in your backyard, they're in your neighborhood. If you look at our Sustainable Development Goals framework, things like poverty, global health, economic development, decent jobs, those are global and local and personal. The other thing that we did when we were thinking about developing this is we took knowledge out of this matrix, and I want to explain why. If I polled everyone in this room and I said, you tell me the 10 most important pieces of knowledge someone needs to thrive in the world, there is no way you'd tell me the same thing, and there's absolutely no way the people in Michigan or California or China or Germany or Bangladesh would tell me the same thing. And so the contextual nature of that, we said, well, what are these understandings about the world that can help us think about what young people need to understand so they can continually come back and reflect on them as new information and learning comes in? The first is that world events and global issues are complex and interdependent. It would be nice if it was black and white, if it was linear A to Z, but that's not how the world works. That understanding our own culture and our history is key to understanding our relationship to others, to everything. That multiple conditions are fundamentally affecting diverse outcomes. Again, we've, especially with media and in politics in the last several years, we've been conditioned to believe that this happened, then this happened. There's always more going on. And for the history teachers or former history teachers in the room, that history matters. The current world system is shaped by history, and if we don't learn from it, it will be to our peril. The second thing we contemplate a lot are these values and attitudes. So what makes up a globally competent individual? Openness to new ideas and ways of thinking, a desire to engage with others, deep self-awareness about identity and culture, and sensitivity and respect for difference, and valuing multiple perspectives. We think about reflection on our lives in relationship to something bigger. That's hard developmentally for young people, for high schoolers. It's a time of inward reflection, but more and more new generations coming up want to think about how to make an impact in the world, how to question our assumptions, how to adapt, and how to demonstrate empathy. And finally, and the skills we look at are the ability to recognize and articulate an understanding of different perspectives, including our own, how to select and apply tools to communicate effectively, particularly across difference. We're struggling with that as adults right now in the US. How to listen actively. Fluency in digital technology, resiliency, critical, comparative, and creative thinking and problem solving. And finally, the behaviors. Seeking out and applying that different perspective when making decisions and solving problems. Forming opinions based on evidence, continuous learning and reflection, lifelong learning, and adopting shared responsibility, encouraging discourse, and approaching thinking and problem solving collaboratively. So for those of you who are familiar with PISA, it is the international benchmark for educational achievement of 15-year-olds across the world. In 2018, they came together and they said, it's not sufficient that we're testing math and science and subject matter knowledge. We need to understand global competence, because once students are out in the world, they need this to thrive. And so I'm going to show you a video about that process.
We live in an interconnected world.
Kita hidup di dunia yang saling berhubungan.
Nosotros vivimos en un mundo interconectado.
우리는 서로 연결된 사회에 살고 있어요.
Vivimos en un mundo interconectado.
Nous vivons dans un monde interconnecté.
These days, education is no longer just about teaching people something, but about helping them develop a reliable compass and the tools to navigate with confidence through a world that is increasingly complex, increasingly volatile, increasingly uncertain. Success in education is about identity. It's about agency. It's about purpose. It's about building curiosity, opening minds. It's about compassion, opening hearts. And it's about courage, mobilizing our cognitive, social, and emotional resources to take action.
Right now we have a lot of issues, and we are acknowledging a lot of problems, like global pandemic,
the climate crisis and climate change,
racial discrimination,
the climate crisis.
You know, the more interdependent the world becomes, the more we rely on great collaborators and orchestrators, people who can think for themselves, but also who are able to join others and other cultures in work and life and citizenship.
With the rise of social media, and you're exposed to different cultures and different issues worldwide, and you see that other countries are also suffering from the same issues.
I feel that it's really important that we feel that, okay, we might be different, we might speak different languages and have different cultures, but in the end, we can all connect to each other.
We need to come to conclusive ideas, and we need to work together. And having a generation of students who are more interconnected is going to be the most efficient way we can do that.
In 2018, the OECD Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, conducted the first assessment of students' capacity to live in an interconnected world. To do well on this assessment, PISA expects that students can combine knowledge about the world with critical reasoning. If you drink a cup of coffee here in Paris, can you see the connections with workers on a coffee plantation at the other end of the world. Second, PISA looks at whether students understand and appreciate the perspectives and worldviews of others. And third, PISA looks at whether students can adapt their behavior and communication to interact with individuals from different traditions, different cultures.
I just hope we build a better world where everybody can thrive and where nobody is left behind.
I hope in 20 years that we'll have a more globally competent and a more understanding generation.
My generation is acknowledging the problems. It's not just looking to the other way. They are acknowledging, and now we have to keep walking, make a step, a big step, and start to help the community, start to help the world, start to have solutions for every problem that we have right now.
So let's join forces to better support globally competent students. And with that I mean students who will engage to improve the living conditions in their own communities and build a more just, more peaceful, more inclusive, and more sustainable world.
So I'd encourage everyone to look at the data that came back from that in 2020. It's pretty fascinating and also, not surprising in some ways, right? They found that the coverage in global issues in the curriculum was positively associated with related student dispositions. So we talk about a world of change makers, individuals that are inheriting these problems. When it shows up in learning, they're better able to do it. And also, unsurprisingly, we found that students that engage in a larger number of these kinds of learning activities around global competence reported more positive attitudes and dispositions towards people and cultures other than their own, right? Something we're desperately struggling with in the US now. And if you can reflect back on our increasing diversity in a multi-ethnic democracy, it is more important than ever. So I want to share with you in this final stretch 20 years of work, World Savvy partnering with schools and districts to help them create these future-ready systems, to embed global competence into teaching and learning and culture, some of the things that we've noted and learned at every level. The first, when we think about students, the environment they need, we talk a lot about exercising voice and choice. This isn't a new phrase, but really considering what it means for their own agency, for that to reflect their embodied identity, their lived experience, and to give them opportunities to step into that. Developing comfort with ambiguity and failure, failing safe, failing fast, learning to iterate. These are critical things if they're going to solve the kinds of problems that we just looked at together. Self-directed learning, seeing the connections across content areas and to their lives, and exploring the global context of the personal, local. And then developing empathy and humility in the face of that, and deep self-awareness. And finally, learning about and with the world. Many of you have travel programs or virtual programs, things that actually help young people engage even in your own community with people who are different from them and problem solve together. The video I'm going to share with you is a group of young people in Minneapolis Public Schools and around that district that did something with World Savvy for a year using our Knowledge to Action framework, where they chose something that was meaningful to them and then had to work all year in a diverse group to develop a solution that they prototyped. So I'll let you hear from them.
Our project is about the use of antibiotics and hormones in meat.
We worked on a project called Brain Drain. It's where the educated people of a certain country leave and travel to a developed country.
The project I'm doing is on women's rights. I wanted to try something new because I felt like since it's about women's rights, I would just want to have my voice being heard.
I decided to write a children's book about bees. Since the bees are kind of endangered and they're dying very quickly.
I hope that my project will change the way the farmers grow their animals.
Maybe I would make a difference in this world. Put out my experiences, I'll pour my heart out on this piece of paper. The title of my poem, Inyo Emera, Women's Rights. Fighting our rights for equality until we're accepted by society. Let's applaud these women who fought for us.
I hope that my project educates kids that about 90% of our food really depends on the bees. And before the project, I wasn't really super into bees.
I was like kind of hesitant because I was like, why are we doing this? Like, it didn't really mean much to me, but now I'm like, oh, this is like really important. Everybody needs to like do something about this.
School, it's a lot more interesting now. I found out that if you actually pay attention and investigate more, you can actually learn some very interesting things.
Instead of just like saying, oh, it's not my problem, this project made me want to like help more people out and focus on real issues.
When you think of World Savvy, you think of like the issues that are affected around this world.
It kind of got me out of my closed mindset, and it made me think about the world as kind of more connected.
Global issues seem so far away, but really they're closer to us than we think.
After the project, I just feel like I can do more. I saw how I can really help in global problems and how I can educate people about them and how they can help too.
Empower young women in schools, organizations, our tools. Let rights be legal, we are equal. And gender gap, this is a wrap.
So the young woman who is in the final part of the video, obviously working on wage inequality and the gender gap, their prototype was of a board game that demonstrated and helped you learn about gender inequality and the wage gap in particular, and then they wanted to sell it and charge men more by the amount of the wage gap. Hilarious, illegal, but hilarious. That was one of my favorite projects. When we think about the work we've done with educators who are really sort of obviously the classroom champions of what this looks like and what we've learned from them and what we've observed, this idea of moving from sage in the stage to meddler in the middle, right? This is a real art of facilitation that allows these kinds of student-led projects to happen, and that allows that kind of agency to happen in the classroom, and it's really critical. The ability to leverage real-world case studies, things that matter to students that they can see in their own lives outside the classroom. To embrace complexity. Again, we're not conditioned to do this. It's like we have a pathological aversion to it sometimes in popular culture, but this is what the world is, and finding ways to open that up for young people. Personalized learning and individual exploration, leveraging technology to widen horizons, incorporating global competence into formal assessment, or whatever you might call it. There's other framings besides our matrix, and then making time for that. One of the things, assessment is sort of the giant elephant in the room, right? And I want to show you a video of a group of educators in Minneapolis that essentially rethought and reimagined assessment with this at the center to try and get closer to measuring what matters.
One of the things that helped make global competency, I think, most real for me in the classroom was having it be the lens through which we assess students. So getting rid of assessing based on the form of assessment, like tests, homework, quizzes, papers, and switching the lens to the skills and behaviors that we are trying to instill. So we have a category for critical and creative thinking. We have a category for communication and collaboration. We've identified these things that are important, and that is how we assess. And it's really made this work, for me, just now I know that we're moving them along. Before, it was something I did, and it was kind of a happy accident if kids became critical and creative thinkers, because in reality, I wasn't ever really assessing that. Yes, I asked them questions that I thought asked them to think critically, but when I only end up with a test grade, I have no real way of parsing out, wow, did they just memorize these facts, or did they do really well on the critical side? So this helped us frame it for the students. By grading it, we tell them it's what's important, and it allows us to track their progress in certain areas. So it has really shifted our grade book from being one of very high stakes to a lot of grades where improvement is paramount.
I had done a traditional gradebook for 13 years, and I love my organizational systems, and I was very wedded to what I had always done. And one of the benefits of teaming is we try new things. And so KK had, I remember coming to the planning session, and KK shared with us what she had piloted with her students in the spring quarter the year before. And after I wrapped my brain around it, I still it was a stretch for me to try to change the grade book that I had done for so long. But having done so, I have to say grading has always been kind of a weight. It's been a burden, and it's always been sort of a necessary evil of teaching, and the part I like the least. And this new system of really isolating the skills that we're working on, and then taking every assessment and putting it in whatever category, and what it ends up meaning is many of our projects, many of our tests, many of our activities are going in multiple categories. And so once I wrapped my brain around how that would work, I just saw immediate benefits. And it ended up in the beginning, in the end, it's done is it's changed our assessments, it's changed our lessons, because now we back it in from what would it be in the grade book, what are we measuring, and what's that going to look like. And one of the things that I really love about it, particularly since we teach middle school, is that we can separate students' executive functioning skills from other skills. And so if we have an essay that students are working on, if that's late, the majority of teachers tend to take points off, by day, by amount of time. And so that's what I used to do. And so taking that essay, and in the end, what was the quality of the writing? What was the quality of the critical thinking? And what part of that grade is from it being late? And so now it goes in 3 separate times. So there is a score for the quality of the critical and creative thinking. There's a separate score in our grade book for the quality of the writing and the mechanics and the organizational piece. And then a 3rd score for whether or not it was on time. And so it's really also changed the conversations we have with students, with families.
We used to have conversations with kids like, tell me why I have a C. Why do I have a C? And now the kid will say, how can I improve my communication and collaboration skills in your class? Because I noticed that I only have 65% in that. So it just immediately shifts the way that we work with our kids.
And finally, in our work with school and district leaders, what we've noticed about the practices and routines that have been very effective to embed this is a deliberate and intentional fostering of openness and transparency in dialogue. And then creating enough space for discourse and developing norms to institutionalize how people talk about these things. And meaningfully engaging parents and the broader community. And then on the policy and structure side, and many of you I know are already doing this, but engaging a range of stakeholders groups as you're developing what this means, so that people understand the collective definition and the metrics that you're using to measure how you're moving along. Including global competence in all critical strategy and guiding documents and in budgets.
One of the main things that we focused on here.
And this is Amy Fearing. She is currently the chief academic officer in Minneapolis, but was a principal at Wellstone, which was a newcomer school, predominantly East African immigrants, and developed an amazing community of transparent dialogue that brought every part of the community with students at the center into the space.
One of the main things that we focused on here is creating and allowing time and space for conversation. Oftentimes, it's the most challenging moments that give us the most impactful results in terms of gaining more global competency or gaining that multiple perspective. It's hard to force on somebody when times are good, when times run smoothly, that there's other viewpoints, there's other ways to see things, there's other ways to do things. But when it's confronted to us that our way is not the right way for that situation or is not the right way in general, that is when we have the moment to pause and think and then develop an action plan on how we move forward. What we have seen here at Wellstone, though, is how do you have the grit and the stamina? How do you have the resiliency and the motivation to get past that misunderstanding? And that's where I think the critical piece of engaging students and staff in understanding themselves first to be able to understand others allows for that conversation. So when we have a situation here at Wellstone where you have different perspectives coming in, whether it's culture, whether it's language, whether it's race, whether it's gender, any of those situations, we pause and we take time as a community to open up that space, to set norms, to set rules, but then to have that space and start hearing where other people are coming from. And that it's not just the outcome of people being able to see it, but it's that process of working through it, because that is the skill that our students are going to need, whether they decide to stay in the United States or go go somewhere else in the world.
I've watched Amy do that expertly, focus on the process, developing the norms so that her community can talk about hard things together. Minneapolis, as probably everyone in this room knows, was the epicenter of our national grappling with racial inequity after the murder of George Floyd. And this was something that school leaders there needed to lean on every day to engage students and faculty in talking about. There's a broader study around innovation in education that's just come out, I think 5 days ago. And so I wanted to take a look at that together as well. It's by the Canopy Project, which essentially, via nomination, found 161 schools across the country. They were trying to basically glean knowledge about where, how, and why schools are innovating to create more equitable learning environments for students. There were 161 schools. 1 in 5 of them were rural. Half were districts, over a third were charters, and some were alternative models. They were serving extremely diverse student populations. And what the data suggests in this report, and I'll include the website there for you, is that innovation isn't just arriving in a limited set or range of schools and only in predominantly privileged environments, and that innovation is more than what's new or different. And it's a really fascinating report to dig into. One of the things that was evident were the top 10 practices that were core to all of these school designs. Included project-based learning, the integration of social emotional learning across the school, competency-based education, we've talked a lot about that, restorative practices, real-world problem solving, designing to meet the needs of marginalized students, social justice focus, interdisciplinary focus, culturally responsive practices, and portfolios and public exhibitions of student work, giving young people a chance to be among audiences in their community and share what they're learning. I apologize again, my vision is going, so this is probably very hard to see in the back. I'd encourage you to download this. And some of the schools in New York may already be in this portfolio. There are a few World Savvy schools represented in here. I want to leave you in the final few minutes thinking about something that's really important. I know in education we're encouraged to sort of develop the plan, get your checklist, work through a checklist. The reality about building global competence and these kinds of competencies in ourselves and in our students is that it's dynamic and it really is aspirational at its core. It's sort of never over. It's a journey. I've been doing this work for 20 years and I would never frame myself as an expert big E. Because my job is to confront all the new information, the new people, the new cultures, the new circumstances that we confront with this set of behaviors and skills and values and attitudes so that we're prepared and ready. How many of you were pandemic experts prior to the year 2020, right? The point is not to be a big E expert when you're on this journey, but to really deeply embed those kinds of competencies both in leadership and in what we bring into the classroom. I also want to stress that as school and district leaders, you really are the change agents and the entrepreneurs that embed this into what the future of learning look like. I'm really in awe by the collective wisdom and expertise and experiences in this room and upstairs as well. Don't want to forget you. Everybody has 3 feet of influence, and every single one of you has the ability not just to shape what the discourse is inside your school system, but how we're influencing broader conversation about what the future of learning needs to be. And Martha really leaned on this idea of being servant leaders and coming together. And the theme of this conference, Together We Rise, to think about how to shape the future of education today, tomorrow, and beyond. And so I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank you for welcoming me here today. This is me if you want to be in touch, and we're also leading a session tomorrow. And enjoy the next few days. I hope that I've provoked some thinking for you that helps you digest what you're about to learn over the next couple of days. And again, my deepest gratitude. Thanks.